Hi, my name is Martin. I would like to welcome you to this tips and tricks video where we will make exploded views inside SOLIDWORKS. Exploded views can be used on drawings and for videos. On the videos we can show both how to assemble and disassemble the model. Here we have a nice assembly that we would like to work with. But before we start making the exploded view, there's a couple of things that we need to take care of, just to make our work easier down the line. First, we need to have a rigid model. If parts can be moved around, they will have different start position and orientations, and we can lose control of the end positions. If I have a model with a lot of options for movement, I just make a dedicated configuration where I can set all the components to a rigid position and then make the exploded view in that configuration. Second, how to view the model. Make sure there is a good orientation and save it, both so we can come back to that orientation, but also when we need to insert the exploded view into the drawing. To start, we'll go into the configuration manager and make a new configuration. We call it exploded, like this. And in my case, down in my mates, I have two different folders, one with all the mates that I need for my movement. I can just go in and suppress that one. And then I have another folder here with all the mates that make my model rigid. So I'll just go in and do this. The second thing we have to do is control over our orientation. So first of all, I just go in and see the model from front, and then I find a good orientation from where to see the model. Press spacebar, and now I can go in and use new view and make a exploded view. So now we always have this orientation to go back to, and also when we put it into the 2D drawing, we know exactly how the model will be orientated. At this point, we are now ready to go in and make our exploded view. Under the configuration manager, we right click on the configuration, and then we go in and say new exploded view. I'll just zoom into the area where the component we want to work with first is located. And in this case, I just want to have the screw that's placed right here. And you can see as when I select it, we have the different orientation that's parallel with the main axis of the assembly. But if we want something else, we can go down here and say what we'll select for example, a different orientation. In my case, we'll just have to move it in the X axis, and I move it out here, let's say around this distance. At the same time, I can also go down here and rotate it, and I'll rotate around this axis here. I can also select another axis to rotate about. Let's say we want it 720 degrees. So now I'll just say done. And if we say OK, and now we can go in and try to see how we can animate this. I can go in here and say I want to animate a collapse. We can see the screw is moving back and rotating at the same time. So that was the first step. Every time we like to move or rotate one or more component, we'll make a step. We can edit each step or add more step by editing feature. Here we can see the first step, what part that have been moved, and in this case rotated. If we like to edit the step, we can click on the step and the direction, distance, etc. can be edited. For example, can we change the distance just by grabbing the arrow in the work area. When we are finished with the changes, we can click done. When we are not editing a step and select a component, a new step will automatically be added. Let's place it here, and we can also add rotation, 720 degrees, and done. So now we are ready for the next step. In our case here, we want to take this washer. If I want multiple components, I can simply add more components. I can also control the direction. If I go down here, you can see there's direction, there's the main directions from the assembly, but I can go in and select, for example, a face, and I will be normal to that face. I can also select an edge, and I will follow the edge. So now we've moved these two components. Let's say I don't want them both in the same step. I want to make two steps. Then I simply go in and deselect one of the component, and I can go in and make an extra step for the other washer. So done. And now we can take the other washer, and I can just move it out. Let's say we'll have it in this location here. I can right click, and then now I can make a new step. Simply go in and take the next component, move it. And when I stop here, you can see I can right click on the mouse, and I'll press OK, and I'm ready to make the next step. In this case, we want to make the other side over here, so it's a little easier if I just rotate my model a little bit and move it over to the side. And now I can do exactly the same on this side, move the screw first, rotate it 720 degrees and OK. And I'll just speed up here a little bit because it'll be the same step as we did on the other side. So now we have made the different steps, and if I go back to my orientation that I want to use on my 2D drawing and zoom in, we can now see there is no component here that is overlapping. If there are some of the components, let's say that was overlapping and it was disturbing for the view on the 2D drawing, we can go in and edit that step simply again by clicking the step we want to edit and go in and change whatever we like to change and then say done. The next we'll do is do exactly the same for the next area down here. So I'll just speed it up and you can follow along or jump over this part of the video. Now we have made the first like 20 steps or something like that. We can go in and press OK and animate the collapse and see the results so far. That looked perfect. Just make a zoom to fit so we can see the bottom part. That is the next area we're going to work on. I'll just go in and say I want to edit the feature or our exploded feature again. Down here we have some different options. One of them is that we can select the sub-assembly part. So we can go in and select each part of a sub-assembly. But we can also deselect this, and let's say we're going to move these sub-assemblies and component in the middle a little further down. I can simply go in and area select them, and now we have selected both the sub-assemblies and whatever component there is in this area, and I can move it down, let's say like this direction and this far, and we can say OK. And now we can zoom in to this area right here and say we're going to make the same with the washers and components in here as we did up in the top. So I'll just go in and start selecting one of the screws and move it out and rotate it. I'll just speed up this part of the video. So far, so nice. Just say OK. Because the next thing we're going to do is that we're going to work with the sub-assemblies. But the sub-assemblies, instead of making all the steps for each sub-assembly, we can go in and make an exploded view inside the sub-assembly and reuse it on this level. So let's go in and find the sub-assembly, and I'll just open it as orientated in the same way, like this. Here in the sub-assembly, we have two configurations. I'll just start on the active configuration and say I want to make a new exploded view. In this case, we'll just take one apart here and move to the right, and the other part over here and move that to the left. And then the bottom part down here, we'll take that one and move that a little distance down like this. So now we have the exploded view we want to have for this configuration. But instead of going in and make the whole exploded view again, we can go in and copy simply by drag and then drop on the other configuration. If you look, you cannot really see that as an exploded view right now, but when we jump into that configuration, you can see the exploded view is already there. There is a copy of it. And if you go in and say we want to animate explodes, we can see the two side part go to the right and go to the left, but the bottom part don't move down. And that's because that in fact is a different part than we have in the first configuration. So if we go in here and say we want to edit the feature, we can see we have the different steps, one for the one side, the other side, and then for the bottom. But the part that is here is not in this configuration. Quick solution is just to add the part to this step. So now the exploded view for this configuration is also finished. So done, say OK, and now we can just go in and collapse, and we are ready to save and jump back to the assembly. Now we are back at the top level assembly. I'll just go in and use my view orientation and make sure that I am in the exploded view orientation, so the model is in the right orientation. When we go in and edit our exploded view, and if you go down here, we can see we still don't have the select sub-assembly parts selected. If I select one of the components in a sub-assembly, I will select the whole sub-assembly. And now I can go in and reuse the exploded from the sub-assembly, simply like this. So no need for doing all the same steps again, because we are now in the top level. In the same way, we can go in and select this sub-assembly. Let's say we just make a step moving this a little further down like this, and then okay. And now we can go in and click, and then we can go in and say we want to reuse it. So now we can see here we have reused it. One thing you can see here that is a little problem is that we in fact have moved all this a little too far down. So now we can go in and find the right step that has to do with that moving down. Something about a little further up here. The step we have right here. And now we can just change that a little bit, move everything a little bit up. And what you also can see is that this part may be getting a little too close, but that we have to go to the sub-assembly to change. Before we switch to the sub-assembly, let's check the animation. Maybe there is something there we can see that is wrong. We also need to change in the sub-assembly. So if we go in and animate the collapse, I'll just pause right away. And then I go down and take this little slider and move it back, and then I can control the steps. And you can see if I go up here, we have the left ring, then we have the right, and then move up and down, and then we have the right, and then we have the left. So when we come over to the sub-assembly, we need to move the steps around, because I want the left part moving before the right part for both ring. It will look nicer if they are like in sync. So now we are over in the sub-assembly, and if I go in and start with the bottom ring, we can go in and say we want to edit the feature because we want this part to be a little closer. So we'll go into that step. It's the step number 3, and I can move up a little bit. Also, I want the rings to be a little closer, so I'll just go in and say we want this to be like 80 millimeters. You can see the dimension down here. And the same we can do with the other step and say we want around 80 millimeters, something like this. Of course, you can go in if we really like to have it be 80 millimeter, go in and type in the dimension. Now we can say okay to this one. So now that's done. If we go down to the other configuration down here and go in and say we want to edit this feature, one thing you have to be aware of, even if there is a copy of the other one, there's no link between them. As soon as you have made the copy, it's two exploded view that has nothing in common. So we have to go into this one, and first thing we have to do is to make this a little shorter. Let's make this 35 millimeters. And then we can go in and take the rings and make those 80 as well in both sides. But there was also the thing about the order up here. It was not in the order we like to have it. So we can simply take the step and drag and drop it below or above the other steps. In fact, you can also reorder them out here. Simply move the steps around. So now we can save everything and go back to the top level assembly. Now we are back at the top level assembly. And if you can look closely, you can see nothing has been updated on the sub-level assemblies. That's because you have to go in and update with the new changes from the sub-assembly. The benefit of that is that you don't ruin an exploded view on a top-level assembly if you suddenly have somebody that's messing around with the exploded view of the sub-assembly. So simply go down here and right-click, and then you can see update with the sub-assembly exploded, and we can see how it's tidied up everything. And the same we can do with the other sub-assembly here, and we can see that's been updated. Now we have an exploded view that look like we have planned. We just need to check the animation. So we go in here and animate collapse. And everything look like we have planned. So we can simply go in and save it. Just be aware that there's different options for playback. Make sure you're on normal mode before you go in and save the animation. We can go in and select what file format we will have. I'll just take the MP4 right in this case, but select the file format that matches whatever your need is. You can change the resolution. You can give a file name and then simply press save, and the video will be saved. It's also possible to have the exploded view on a drawing. Here we have an empty drawing. I'll just go in and use a model view, take my file, say next. I have to make sure that I use the right configuration if I have multiple configurations. And if I have an exploded view in the configuration I'm using here, we have the option to have it in exploded view. Now I'll just wait a little with that option. We need also to make sure that we have the right orientation down here. I've selected the exploded view orientation, and now I can go in and say I want to put in this view. Zoom in a little bit so we can see it easier. So when the view is selected, I now have the option to go here and show the exploded, and we can see how the model will look when it exploded here on the 2D drawing. So easy way to go in and make drawings and videos of exploded. This is Martin signing off. Hope you have learned something new. See ya.